discussion is, how can companies leverage e-commerce to reposition their business in a post-COVID world? So joining us, we will be joined by Mr. Mutisunge Zulu, National Secretary and member of Ecommerce Association of Zambia. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Zulu.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Also joining us is Mr. Owen Malambo, Head Digital Transformation and Innovation from ZANACO. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Malambo.
Thank you. My pleasure, and happy to be back this year again.
Wonderful. Also joining us is Mr. Francis Mumbi, Head Data Office Stanbic. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Mumbi.
Thank you very much, and it's great to be part of this year's e-commerce conference and expo. Looking forward.
Wonderful. So I will be your moderator. My name is Malama Lumbwe, as Japheth has already said. I am a recruitment and labor brokering consultant from Precision Recruitment International. It's such an honor to be with everyone here today. Okay, let's get straight into it. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected the way many companies conduct business and has left a trail of unemployment in its wake. The pandemic has, in many countries, put an end to certain types of businesses. As a result of the pandemic, many people have turned to e-commerce to purchase essential goods and services as required. To safeguard customers' health and that of their staff, companies have had to realign their business operations. For some businesses, this has meant cutting their capacity to adhere to prescribed public health requirements for social distancing. Also, the measure to sanitize the place of business has added to the cost of doing business. So to start the discussion, my first question will be going to you, Mr. Zulu. Are you ready?
Yes.
Wonderful. The first question is, what do you think has been the most significant impact COVID has had on businesses? Would you like me to read that again?
No, I got it.
Good.
So thank you so much, Malama, and thank you very much, everyone. And I'm excited to be at this e-commerce expo this year. So allow me to deviate a little bit. I mean, I'm an economist, and if I look at what COVID has done this year, clearly we are seeing dislocation of what we already knew in terms of correlations. For example, if I talk about a Cobb-Douglas function, which is a productivity equation, we always talk about land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. But clearly, disease pandemic has actually shown that labor goes deeper than just it being a factor of production, as in the individual and what they have to offer, but that labor is actually the most important factor of production, because without a healthy workforce, there can be no productivity. We would not even be talking e-commerce, because this e-commerce requires an individual to either log on to the internet and be able to transact. And then secondly, technology has been underplayed so much. We're seeing that COVID is giving us a different definition to what technology is. So if I put labor as an important factor of production, and then technology clearly as an enabler, then we can deduce that COVID in itself has actually had positive and negative disruption. But today we are discussing how we can harness opportunity from the negativity that COVID has, presented. So if I look at Zambian businesses, for instance, getting into March, I would like to categorically state that e-commerce for like Zambian companies is at infancy right now. A tale of a yellow Boeing 737. So if you do go to the airport, you will see a 737 that does land, I think 3 times or twice a week, and it's always full of goods that are coming from different parts of the world. And for me, having a conversation with the MD for Zambia Airports Corporation. That was last year. And I was told that is e-commerce. Someone in Zambia, you know, went online and bought an iPhone. They bought stilettos. They bought all those shoes, and those shoes were then coming into Zambia. That's e-commerce. It's got its own pros and cons. And of course, if you have to buy things from outside the country, look, we would start talking about being the people that are putting so much pressure on our exchange rate because we are buying foreign goods and we're not producing our own goods. But then what COVID has done is it's given a little twist to that, because even locally, there is that opportunity. I've seen companies like Afri Delivery. The first time I ever saw Afri Delivery, I thought they would be delivering burgers to my doorstep. But then I was very impressed to notice that there has been innovation where Afri Delivery will allow you to buy cement from Lafarge and it could actually be delivered to your doorstep. That is e-commerce. Our hotels are getting all payments online. That is e-commerce. But one thing I've noticed is that because most of Zambian entities were not ready e-commerce wise, I was listening to Warwick Kane's presentation and it's brilliant. But the question I had to ask myself is the genesis. How are we going to change that mindset? You know, we can talk about conversion rates and everything, but what about a company that doesn't even have a website? So one thing that really stands out in this period is that it is very important for companies to now have platforms with which they can be identified, and we're talking visibility. So this visibility is also very important because it will allow for sales. People are not comfortable to go to the malls, you know, people are not comfortable to go to the shops to go and transact. But if someone can take up that opportunity to say, you can make a payment from the comfort of your home and I will deliver these goods that you want to your home, that's an opportunity. And I've seen this opportunity in the retail space because the young at heart are the ones that are very vigilant. I've seen people pay for makeup using a link, and the makeup artist actually follows you. So that is e-commerce. But the question is, what will it take to change the mindset of businesses? I was talking to a colleague last night, and I asked him, because I didn't know what I was going to come and talk about here. And I asked them to say, what do you know about e-commerce? And they told me, Muti, this e-commerce thing is frustrating me because I can't buy building materials from Kamwala because the vendors there prefer cash. So you can see that it's a mindset problem. Why are people preferring cash? Are they running away from tax, you know, or do they just not have trust in platforms? And I see that Warwick talked about the trust factor, for example. So if I see a website, if I see a link, will I trust it? Is my money safe? So security issues. So there is need for awareness, you know, there's need for awareness. There's need for businesses to also get that level of information, because people do not know that their sales could actually double if they actually use online platforms to make those payments. But once they know, then will we solve that puzzle and that equation? And I think that is what has really dented the cash flow, you know, posture of most entities that are not able to continue operating the way they should be, and they've resorted to, you know, trimming down workforce and things like that. But I feel this space has so much opportunity, but it needs the right awareness. People need to know about this. How will people learn about e-commerce for business survival? So I think this e-commerce expo is a great platform to bring out all these pointers so that people can get enlightened. You know, technology is not an enemy, you know, so we will talk about security. We'll talk about, I mean, banks right now are actually stepping into the space. And if individuals are not careful, banks are already talking platform posture. People are talking platform banking where banks want to do the same things that are being done on e-commerce platforms. They want to bring people together to transact. So you can see that it had to take COVID for us to realize that there was this opportunity. So that's a positive we can actually take from it. I think for now, that'll be my 2 cents comments on the question you asked me.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Mr. Malambo, the next question is directed to you. Are there any examples of how the organization you work for has used e-commerce to reposition its business during the COVID pandemic? Would you like me to read that out again? Is that clear?
No, that's fine. I got it, Malama, and thank you so much for the question. Muti, thank you so much. I think you sum it up so well. You've set the tone right. I think you've really brought to home what e-commerce is and what it has done to a lot of individuals and organizations. Owen is my name, as everybody knows. So since you've asked about my organization, I work for ZANACO. I'm head of transformation there. And there's so many ways that COVID has affected us as well. And there's so many other ways that we've used e-commerce to our benefit. One quick way that I would easily want to highlight is how we have relooked at our customer touch points. Remember how now COVID has certain restrictions around a distance between two people or gatherings and all that. So now, as banks, like Muti said, we are relooking at how do we then begin to create touch points that do not put risks in front of our customers and ourselves. So you will notice that there's a digitalization going on, and this is really just across the industry. But what's interesting is that you see, and I want to just refer to a common joke that is going around of how a question has been asked to say, what is the driver of transformation in any organization? What has made you become e-commerce aware? And in some circles of the society, people are saying it's actually COVID. But I think organizations that are ready, organizations that have been planning, where you have a transformation plan, my role is testimony to that, as ZANACO, we're really looking at how do organizations set up to be able to react to any changes that come through. It could be COVID, it could even be rain. You know, suddenly we have a flood and people can't move. How ready are we? And this is why organizations have to invest in the right platforms, the right technology. So we have had as ZANACO to relook at our cost, like any other bank. So are we putting our cost where it should be? Because we have stopped doing certain things. For example, do we really need to have branches open the whole time, when what people do go for in the branches is probably to do a transfer or to do a deposit or to do a withdrawal? And those are services now that we can easily provide on a mobile phone, and life can go on. So there's a lot of ways that banks have relooked at the cost model, but also at the revenue model, because right now we are also looking at being able to build solutions that are financially inclusive. Because remember, COVID is not just for a certain segment of people. COVID is affecting literally across all the entire population. What that means is that as banks, we now need to be sensitive to the fact that not everyone will have the luxury of getting into a car and getting into town and then walking into a branch. Others will not even afford to get into a bus, for example. But as banks, and ZANACO is really, really big on that, we are at the center of providing solutions that are financially inclusive. I want to speak to you a bit about what we call QR code, or what we've called from a ZANACO perspective, it's called ZAPE. It's a tap and go payment, near field communication, where anyone can use it, from the CEO of an organization right down to an Amlenga at the corner. And what we're doing is providing a platform where, to Mutisunge's point, we're creating a marketplace where people can easily come through and be able to do all their financial services. Over and above that, I think from a ZANACO perspective, I also know for a fact that we are doing a lot more around automation. I would imagine that Muti's place is doing the same. I would imagine that Francis's place is doing the same, because automation now has come in to supplement efforts that human beings should otherwise be doing. Now, I always say that there's always an opportunity in any problem. With COVID, a lot of banks in the recent past, I think in the last 10 to 15 years, have been trying to do just that. Can we automate? Can we centralize? Can we be more efficient? Can we be more effective? And what COVID has done, and what e-commerce presents as an opportunity, is that now banks have had to fast track that process. I know that a lot of banks now will probably say for a certain activity that ideally would have gone into a branch, you now should be able to do it on your own. And there's always obviously controls that come with that. The other thing that I think as a bank, we have really tried to look into very effectively and to give comfort to our customers is issues around cyber security and cyber fraud. and Mutisunge was talking about how there's still resistance to adopt e-commerce. And that is as a result of genuine concerns that people have, where sometimes fulfillment of transactions doesn't happen. So today, if you want to do a payment and then it doesn't go through for whatever reason, maybe internet, maybe system failure, it doesn't give customers the comfort that they need to be able to continue transacting on a platform. So as banks now, we need to be able to make sure that that is an area of concern where we can provide service to the keynote speaker's earlier point, that where we need to provide a service of comfort to the customer, that they would always want to come back and do business with us. Outside cybersecurity, I think also what we need to be very careful with as institutions that are in the service industry and financial industry is then how we provide accessibility to our platforms. It's not just about financially inclusive. Yes, you can actually be financially included, but is the solution reaching all parts of the country? What we've seen significant, and this is obviously hard statistics, for example, that at the moment, when you look at the mobile money space, you will notice that MNOs have still taken about over 80% of the market share. What that tells you is that there's an issue of reach, and MNOs have managed to get that right. And that is why, as banks as well, we need to come in and supplement that effort. And you see, the more you look at banking now and the more you look at financial institutions, we are more inclined to look at each other now as players in the same space, building an ecosystem. Because the moment you start going so strong on the competition, which is okay as well, you then dilute the cost model, and then you probably dilute what benefits you can transmit to the customer. So we have reached a point where, as banks, we are saying, can we work with whoever is a partner and who's good at what they do? I'll give you an example of what ZANACO has done. So we have set up an innovation hub, which is where I am right now. And what we've done is we've opened it up to even banks to say, can you come and can we look at problems that affect us to an extent that they detriment how we provide service to a customer. We have met, for example, MNOs. We brought MTN, Airtel together and said, we have an issue with fraud. And those are things that we have been able to do in reaction to the fact that there's COVID, and then there's also an opportunity in e-commerce for us to do things right. I think that will be my submission on this one.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Mr. Mumbi, this question is directed to you. How do you see the future of e-commerce in Zambia and Africa at large?
Thank you very much. And I just want to acknowledge the submissions made by my fellow discussants. And I couldn't agree more. But I think maybe just to use it as a springboard to my comment, just to build on Mutisunge and Owen's submissions, is that the impact of COVID overall has also been a digital accelerant. I think Owen touched on to that. And when you look at the global space, if you look at e-commerce as an ecosystem, there's been an acceleration of e-commerce across the board. You've seen a big investment push by big global players in platforms which support e-commerce trade. If you look at locally, I think we're also beginning to model the global trends, although at a smaller scale. And when I compare to when we had this conference 3 years ago to where we are now, I think there's been a slight movement of trust to the positive side in the e-commerce platforms. I think now we are beginning to trust these e-commerce platforms to, of course, support our daily needs and, of course, beginning to integrate into the B2B space. I think going into the business space and the future of e-commerce, what I can say is that the future is already here in terms of e-commerce, but it's not evenly distributed. What you see happening is that with the COVID at play and also COVID beginning to sort of open up the potential of already existing technology in not only just driving business, but enabling business to grow and scale at minimal scale, is that we're going to see an opening up of new ways of doing and delivering e-commerce. For instance, currently you've seen on most social media platforms, groups have emerged, individuals have come up selling different goods and services. You find people are distributing spare parts, people are distributing cosmetics, people are distributing farming supplies, That's e-commerce now extending within the social space. So what I see is that if you look at Zambia as an economy, as an ecosystem, e-commerce is going to emerge more through the social space. Because when I look at the Internet 1.0, we sort of leapfrogged leapfrogged into the mobile internet, and that's the domain of social media. So e-commerce will become more social. E-commerce will be more pervasive, with platforms being built within the market, such as contactless payments. We're going to see e-commerce payments integrate into social platforms such as Facebook and WhatsApp. We've seen experiments being run in areas such as India and Brazil, where WhatsApp recently launched a business payment platform on their WhatsApp channel. So we begin to see e-commerce become more social. We begin to see e-commerce become more pervasive. Secondly, if I look at Zambia and the Zambian market and how we are organized as a society, I think we're going to see e-commerce also extend to much more simpler form factors. So e-commerce currently runs on the smartphone or mobile powered devices. What I see also happening is that e-commerce should now extend to much more simpler form factors such as USSD. That's a domain which hasn't been fully exploited by e-commerce. With the growth in mobile money, growth in mobile banking platforms, already seeing people exchange value through USSD platforms, which is much more simpler form factors and has got wider reach. Now is to now build payments capabilities for purchase of goods and services on top of those platforms. Third point around how we see e-commerce emerge is also e-commerce becoming much more with stronger links across borders as well as within the local space. Currently, there are players who are coming out from. Currently, we're seeing players coming in and connecting customers between Zambia and China. We see those trade routes increase, powered by e-commerce rails. We also see intra-regional trade. South Africa, Zambia, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana, Zambia, Malawi. So those rails should begin to open up, powered by the e-commerce platforms. So what I'm seeing is that, of course, is an acceleration of adoption and utilization of e-commerce. It's a much more social ecosystem emerging, built around social platforms such as Facebook and WhatsApp, which are in common use. We see innovations coming into place of much more simpler form factors to deliver e-commerce to customers. Instead of you having to have a smartphone to be able to participate in this ecosystem, a much more simpler phone, which is USSD based, or something which is based on a smart feature phone. I know players in the market, in the mobile space, are already distributing these devices as platforms on top of which e-commerce trade occurs. So I'm having a much more optimistic view in terms of how this ecosystem evolves in the next couple of years. And I think COVID has been the spark to begin to drive that adoption, and people and beginning to help us appreciate what's possible and what can be done with existing technology.
All right, wonderfully said. Thank you very much, Mr. Mumbi. Just before we go into our questions, please note a poll is currently being conducted. Kindly take time to respond. Okay, now we'll take a few questions from our audience. If you have any questions for our panelists, please drop us a message in the chat room and we will read it out, or raise your hand and we will allow you to ask live. As you ask, please remember to give us your full name, which organization you're from, if any, and tell us to whom your question is being targeted. I can see we have our first question. Unfortunately, we don't have a name or organization, but I will read it. It is directed to you, Mr. Zulu, and it reads, as an economist, do advise how best can we plan well for the future of our business transactions when our currency is very unstable? Would you advise that we move our mode of transaction from Kwacha to USD when we set up our e-commerce platforms? That's to you, Mr. Mutisunge Zulu.
Thank you very much, Malama, for that question. Apparently, look, there's a whole confluence and area of hedge solutions that I would suggest. Like, first of all, if you're worried about your currency at an individual level, then you might want to say, okay, should I save in dollars and then use my dollar account to purchase goods that are outside? But I think in the discussion, we're also picking that there are opportunities for local e-commerce. So if you're going to talk about local e-commerce, that's in local currency usually. So you're not going to have any exchange rate risk. But there is one thing that is always an elephant in the room when it comes to any economic discussion is the structure. We still have structural issues. The reason why people have to import from other countries, buy iPhones, all those other brands, is we're not doing a Buy Zambia campaign because we don't produce those things. We don't make iPhones in Zambia, and everyone wants an iPhone. And even if Zambia has iPhones at the iStore, it's not going to be at the same price I'll buy it at if I have to use, is it eBay or any other. So people also search for value and they also look for cost. So if I'm going to save, say $300, I might as well get it online. But it's also sending a message to say, our capability, do we produce products competitive enough for people's behavioral, tendencies to shift, to start buying locally, And then the other answer would be, if we can look, it's not just look, what are people going to buy from outside versus from locally? So locally, you have a whole array of goods. I mean, you want to order in you don't want to leave your home. You want to buy food, you want to buy a whole lot of things. We could actually ramp up. So if more things could be purchased locally, then I don't think we'd be worrying about these small transactions that will add pressure on the currency. Lastly, I wanted to give an example. When I lived in South Africa, those that lived in farms, because of a flood or something, and you were incapacitated to go to Spar to buy your goods, you could actually just go online and do all your shopping, and Spar would actually come to your doorstep. So we're looking forward to a time when ShopRite will bring stuff to your doorstep because you live in the farms and you're feeling lazy to go to, So there is no right and wrong answer, yes, but I can't really put the blame on having to e-commerce transactions as they'll put so much pressure on the currency. It's a balance at the end of the day, but it's what it is.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Malambo, I will direct this question to you. Unfortunately, the attendee hasn't given a specific which panelist should like to answer this question, so I will try and read it to as a startup. I feel that the cost of payment fees is still too high. Most payment gateway aggregators are charging between 3.5% to 12%. What do you think should be done by these payment aggregators to reduce the cost, bearing in mind that some customers do not want to pay for courier services? So in some cases, the businesses bears the cost as well. I hope you understand the question. If you want, I can read it again.
I do. Thank you so much. I do. I think to just make it very clear, I think the question is spot on. I think business fees and cost to serve is still high, and especially when I did mention around us being able to focus on being financially inclusive. I would imagine that if financial inclusion also at a larger scale involves us considering what it means for someone to be a startup. They're a startup, so we don't expect them to have a lot of resources to be able to do or run at the same capacity as already existing or bigger organizations. In my own view, I think, I don't know, and I would be poking back to Mutisunge and say, look, should we be looking at laws that allow smaller organizations to be, exempted in certain, let's say, costs? But ultimately, I think if you're an individual and you want to start up a company, you will always have to sit down and plan it in such a way that it allows you to understand that the business you're getting into will require you to meet certain fees. Now, when you look at the aggregators as well, unfortunately, they also are not providing a free service. Usually, whatever fees you pay for a service, remember that the provider will have done what we call cost to serve. So they will have factored in what it means for them to give you that service. Usually, the best way to reduce service in any environment is to drive volume. Now, the more e-commerce gets, expansive, the more people become aware. If we can get into Kamala and make e-commerce possible, volumes will go up. When you have high volumes, then it's very possible that then the benefit in fee structure can trickle down to the consumer. Unfortunately, at the moment, because the maturity of e-commerce is not at the right level, you are seeing that there's compensation in pricing. And that's what usually happens, not just for startups. It will happen in any service provided, that for as long as there is very little demand, the chances are that there will be compensation that is locked into the pricing. What we're hoping, and this is what Francis was saying earlier, is that the more we have awareness around e-commerce, the more people get comfortable, the more we stabilize platforms for e-commerce, the more we get the population to be very comfortable with e-commerce, it will get better for everyone. The pricing conversation can even get much lighter. I also know that there's a lot of dependencies, by the way. Again, let me refer to Muti's example of a spa in South Africa, where they delivered groceries when you feel that you can't go to town. If you bring it to a Zambia context, it will probably only be restricted to a few areas around Lusaka and maybe, around the line of rail. The problem is the moment you drive 20 kilometers out of town, there's no road or the road is bad. And there's no clear direction. And so if ShopRite wanted to bring things to Owen and Sons, you find that they probably will probably be talking about risk of the car and the road and all that. So to mature e-commerce, it's a cocktail of many things, and the government has to come in, by the way. The government has to come in and help us make certain things deliberate. The Economic Association of Zambia have to continue giving guidance as experts in this field. Then there's me and my friend Mumbi, who have to keep building solutions that make sense, both at a cost level and at a revenue level.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Malambo. Okay, it looks like we don't have any more questions. So if there are any questions from the attendees, if once we're done with this first session, you still have a question, please feel free to send it through our chat room. We'll definitely get back to you via email. So I think this is all from my end. It's been a pleasure hosting the first panel discussion. Thank you to all our lovely panelists for your time and for your lovely answers.